Welcome to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver. Wednesdays, which it isn't yet. I know. The show airs on Wednesday, but we're doing it on Facebook. I'm hoping the station will open up soon. What do you think, Marc? I'm Tasha Sims.
And I'm Marc Caron.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it'll be interesting. I'm not sure the rules and regs regarding passports and things like that there, but we know the mask mandates are now pretty much, a voluntary thing, and as opposed to a few different areas like medical places and things. Yeah. So I'm hoping that, it'll open up soon, but it's been 2 years.
No, I can't even imagine that. It's been 2 years that we've actually been in the studio, but so it'll be a trip. It'll be fun.
Well, and remember the one thing, we were at the last live show to broadcast out of the studio when it all happened a couple of years ago. So that's always kind of one of those interesting, fun facts for Conscious Living Radio.
Well, I'm super excited about today's show. Our guest is Judy Wilkins-Smith. She's a highly regarded organizational, individual, and family patterns expert. She's renowned in her systemic work with constellations. She's an author, a motivational speaker. Her passion for visionary leadership and global change has led to 18 years of assisting individuals, executives, and families to end limiting cycles, reframe challenges into lasting breakthroughs and peak performance. She's the author of Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a powerful guide to transformation through disentangling multi-generational patterns. I know it's a mouthful, but we're going to dive right into it. We're going to talk about emotional spring cleaning, just what that can look like when you decode your emotional DNA and explore the system that most influenced you, which really is your family. So welcome to the show, Judy.
Thank you, Tasha. It's lovely to be with you.
So let's start at the beginning. First of all, what attracted you to systemic work? Maybe we can define what systemic work is in the broadest sense, but then also personally, what drew you to becoming an expert in this field?
It's a crazy story, but I'll make it brief. But to begin with, what is systemic work? Systemic work and constellations go together. So systemic work is really the study of you within your system. And most often, as you said, your primary pattern maker is your family system. So it's the study of how you came to be you, how you're affected by prior generations, and why certain patterns have come to you now, so that you can change them into their higher form and use them as strengths and gifts, which is what they were meant to be in the first place. How did I get into it? My father was killed in Texas. I was busy writing books because I thought it was either do something or go crazy. Mm-hmm. I met somebody who said, you should come and study my work and I'll help you with a book. So I went and studied the work and got no help with the book. But that was the beginning of a long journey into this work. And I guess about halfway in, somebody said to me, well, of course you could do this. And I went, okay, why? And they said, because you're from South Africa. That is where all of this work started with Bert Hellinger. Who knew? He interacted with the Zulu tribe and found they had no neuroses. And when he looked, it was because they would go back into the system to see what was wrong. Now, interestingly enough, I was a healthcare professional, worked in the field, left, and when my father was killed, they failed him in all of the areas that I was a specialist in. And so I said, I'm done with that. But even more interesting was when I left South Africa, the person who gave my farewell speech was a Zulu gentleman. And he said, he was one of the chiefs of surgery. He said, you may be leaving us, but you will find a way to represent us in the world. And I went, yeah. And now I do it every day.
Love that. And I love the synchronicity.
Lots.
Yeah. Do we have a sound glitch there, Marc? I'm hearing kind of this weird echo. Is it maybe only on my end? Oh, I don't hear you at all.
I'm hearing it a little bit too. I'm not sure where it came from, but
Let's ignore it. It's gone now.
Exactly.
It was the Zulu chief going on
There
here.
you go. There you go.
So we all know about physical DNA and how that is passed on. Let's move into how emotional DNA is passed on from generation to generation.
Okay. Very interesting piece. So what happens is you have an event. The event is enough of a significance to create an impact on the system, which creates an imprint, which then becomes a blueprint for generations of successive suffering or doing things that way. So we notice that patterns of thoughts, feelings, actions are then passed down, because with any event that occurs, the minute there's an event, and you know this, you have a reaction. Your reaction begins to spawn a whole pool of thoughts. The thoughts, of course, generate feelings, or maybe the other way around. We're not always sure which comes first. But these create a library of ideas, which we then act on, and this becomes a pattern or a mindset. And as soon as that pattern or mindset is strong enough that we believe what we're selling ourselves, it becomes the truth. Only it's not the truth, it's your truth, and you can change that anytime you want to. And of course, sorry, go ahead.
No, let's just dig in there. How is it actually transmitted? So there's an individual, they experience something very intense. They make a belief about it. They now have a narrative. And I hear you saying It's not the truth. It's a personal interpretation. How is that passed on to a child or to the next generation?
Don't do that. You really shouldn't. It's very dangerous. Watch out. In our family, we don't. Mom is sad. Mom is depressed. Oh, so as I grow, I'm sad and I'm depressed because heaven forbid mom should carry it on her own. I'm going to help her and I'll carry it too. So now it passes down to me. Well, my daughter sees me sad and depressed and goes, that's how it works. I'm sad and depressed too. So in our language, in the way we share our feelings, in the actions we take, the children are watching. The children are listening. The children are feeling. And
everything's personal to the child.
And everything is so personal. So if mom is sad, it's either I'll share that, or I had a beautiful client who said to me, I used to always give my mom a rose because it made her smile. And I said to her, why did it make her smile? And she went to her mom and said, why do we smile when there are roses? Because roses were good news in our family. So now we know good news is roses. And I can make mom happy by bringing good news just with this rose. So it passes down too. So it's not even just language and actions and thoughts and feelings. It's pictures. It is things like mom had an accident and killed somebody. If somebody ran out in front of the car. Now either I have an accident at much the same age, or I become a safety inspector. And I don't know why, but it's really, really important that I keep people safe, because I'm keeping mom safe too.
Right. I think you said, and I love this languaging, while the struggle we feel is real, it may not belong to you. And that's what you're describing here, yes?
Absolutely. Very often the struggles that we have and the things that we say or do began in the mouths and the bodies of our ancestors, not us. But we carry them very faithfully as though they were ours. And there is a very important piece to that. There is a reason we do that. It's not the multi-generational curse. It's actually the multi-generational clues. What isn't working? And if I take it on, how can I switch that up? And how can I turn it into something that it becomes a remarkable strength for me, an incredible talent, and it switches the entire family dynamic. Now, instead of being strugglers, we're thrivers. Now,
So
go ahead.
I'd love to shift the second half to that experience that you're talking about, but let's dig in and just unpack more when people, the impact being asleep to this has for people so they can recognize themselves.
Oh, wow.
Then we'll shift into how it can be used and how to turn it into your gold mine. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I think relationship is an area I really see great impact. If you are not aware when you're upset or reactive to the meaning that you're making, I guarantee your family system's involved in that moment.
Totally,
If you
totally
don't know
involved.
what meaning you're making, your family system's talking. You agree?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting because often when people say, I'm really angry, I'm so annoyed, I'll say to them, where did that first happen? Who told you that? What did you make it mean about you? And
Right.
what did you make it mean about them? It's
Right.
really important. So yes. And if you're just doing it, it's one of the classic clues and signs of a systemic piece. If you're hyperreacting, if your language is inflated, if you're really dogmatic, it's probably not yours. You're just carefully protecting it.
And remind me, I don't want to go there right this second, but let's go globally also near the
Sure.
end of this, because what you just described is what's happening in the world, everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of
right?
what's happening in the world. There's also a lot of potential, by the way. I mean,
Yes.
I'm super hopeful.
Yes, I
Yeah.
get you. I get you. If we can step out of the fear, just like in our family system, step out of the story and move into the something else that wants to be birthed here. So we're going to get there. I want to talk about beliefs now, because every family, I think no one really thinks about, gee, my family in particular has values and beliefs that's different than your family, Marc's
Right.
family. Who are men? Who are women? Oh my God, that's going to completely influence how you behave and who you trust and your whole concept of safety. So I wonder if you can just touch on those beliefs and values and perceptions of our own masculine, feminine.
So if we look at masculine, feminine, it also shapes our relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
It passes down very heavily. If you have great-grandmother who loses great-grandfather, he dies, and she's left to put food on the table. The next thing we know is I have a client who says to me, my mother never sees me. She doesn't look at me. Okay, who is she looking at? She's looking at her mother. Who is her mother looking at? She's looking at her mother who couldn't see her. No, because she had to put food on the table. So your belief that mothers don't look at their children is a little skewed. When you look back at grandma and you go, or great-grandma, thank you. Because you put food on the table, I'm here. Mom, grandmother, thank you for looking after mom. Because you did that, my mom is here. Hey, Mom, I'm the first girl in 4 generations who can look at her mom and say, I see you. I'm also the first in 5 generations who can look at her daughter and say, I can see you. And so that changes. So the beliefs are, again, what we make of them. Also, you may have right back there with great-grandmother, you can't depend on a man. Well, no, if the guy's dead, you can't depend on the guy. But that's not what cycles through. What cycles through is can't depend on a man. So all the women begin to lose the men in the family. We don't go back and say, well, grandpa kind of didn't have much of an option here.
Right. All the good men in my family system were heroes and, in the war, and they died in Auschwitz, but they were doing heroic things. And it wasn't until I did my genogram that I realized the belief around men. I have a son, and I looked at my genogram, and it was either bad men or losers or heroes. It was so strong. And I realized the belief was the only good man. It came out of my mouth. The only good man's a dead man.
I was going to just say, right? The only good man is a dead man.
So what does my son have to do to be good? And I went, no, it stops right here, right now, because I don't believe that. So, but it was alive in the system. It was so easy to see.
And I love that you said that and that you did that, because otherwise, in order to be a good man, he may well have died.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not a good plan.
Not a good plan. What scientific evidence is there for this emotional transmission? This is just reminding me of the Holocaust, because it had popped into my head. And I know there are lots of studies done on survivors and their children. Do you have some data that kind of supports this whole examination?
Yeah, sure. There are 2 that stand out. One is the Great Dutch Hunger Winter, which people can read about. And that was when there was an entire city that was barricaded, much like we're seeing right now. And they had to do without water and food. They were eating roots. They were doing all sorts of things to stay alive. And what they discovered was that the mothers had two different things that happened for them. They would either pass on malnutrition to their kids, even though they were being well fed, or obesity. I need to eat because I don't know where the next food is coming from. And this echoed down for generations and generations. Most recently, we're seeing the studies on 9/11 where they're now demonstrating that the children of the women who were pregnant when 9/11 happened and had PTSD are exhibiting the same PTSD. So this is well documented. There are a number of studies like that. We also know that this links very closely to neuroscience, because with neuroscience and neuroplasticity, we know that you can change that pattern. And there's an interesting piece with that. It links to strong emotions. So if you want to change a pattern to something really good, it's the elevated emotions, it's the strong belief, it's what you're telling yourself, one thought, one feeling, one action at a time. And if you make it clear enough, your body goes, got it. That's the new truth. Okay, now we have a truth again.
Do you have some guidance as to, like, I'm sure this, what you're saying is resonating for people in their own lives, but do you have some guidance around, you understand there's a pattern, where do you begin to look? How do you intuit where to look for this pattern playing out so you can change it and avoid it repeating?
Yes, there are always two patterns sitting next to each other. The pattern that's trying to stop and the pattern that's trying to start. And each one is in service of the other. So what you want to do to find out where the patterns are if you've got ancestor or ancestral genealogy, great. If you don't, just simply look at your own events and notice, where are you angry? Where are you frustrated? Where are you sad? Where are you depressed and hopeless? What are the ones that pull you down? That's the pattern that's saying to you, pay attention to me. It's time to stop. I need to rest and become wisdom for you. You need to look at the other pattern, which is the chapter that only you can write. Now, this pattern, the one that's pulling you down, frequently or most often belongs to your ancestors or to those who came before you. It isn't yours, you're carrying it. The pattern that only you can, or the chapter that only you can write, is the pattern that's trying to emerge through you. And you will very often find that in your dreams, your heart's desire, the big projects that you want to accomplish, the ambition that you have. And what you've got to do is pay attention. Because if you come from a family system where you have those little voices that go, you can't do it. Of course you can't do that. Nobody can do that. Stop.
Doesn't make sense.
Exactly. You're going to go stall, and what you'll experience is a very sore heart, because that pattern that's trying to emerge is being denied. But if you are really clear that this is something that has got your attention and you've got to do it, it does a remarkable thing. It pulls you past the old patterns. It pulls you past the excuses, and it says, let's go. And so what happens is you find that you focus on that, and suddenly you're noticing, I wanted a red Mercedes. There are all the red cars coming down the road. You're resonating with those pieces, and you're invested in the way forward. And that's a very important place to be.
And are there flags in the family system? How many generations would you look at? And are there flags around losses? And cutoff is another one that I always look for, because if something was cut off, if people are estranged and there's no more communication, there's something buried in there. And it seems that gets passed on quite a bit.
It absolutely does. And I'll tell you why. And that, by the way, is what happens to Bruno in Encanto, who I was speaking about. But yes, what happens is if you cut off or reject anybody in the family, it doesn't make you good. It doesn't make you bad. It's none of those. What's happening is you're separating yourself from the source of the information that you need to be able to take the next step. You're creating an exclusion. And what we know about exclusions in this work is that anytime you create an exclusion, that creates a pattern that begins to expand and repeat. So the details of an event may fade, but the symptoms get louder and louder and louder until eventually you go, I can't take this anymore. This has got to stop. I have to do something different. And boom, now you're looking at the pattern, and now we have a chance, and the system can begin to settle.
All right, ladies, before we begin, maybe I can ask, because patterns I think are important. If you're hearing that sound as well, Tasha, are you hearing that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I'm seeing a pattern, so I'm going to ask a question. Tasha, do you have your blue Yeti mic with you? Are you there with it?
Yeah.
Can you double check your mic on Zoom and make sure that your system is set to your Yeti?
We did this last time.
I know. I'm saying I saw a pattern and I thought, Judy, it was perfect. Just the up arrow beside your microphone on the toolbar is fine.
Sure, if I saw an up arrow up by my toolbar, you mean in view?
On the bottom in your
speaker.
Zoom, yeah,
speaker?
and then it'll say
no, that
higher,
just changed.
it says microphone.
Does not.
No?
Oh, I know that feeling, Tasha. You have my absolute sympathy.
On the bottom left of your Zoom toolbar,
oh, I see
is
that
a little microphone.
Picture. Yeah, okay.
Click the up arrow. And
it's the top, Yeti. It's the Yeti.
It is
checked.
the Yeti, eh?
Is
okay,
that
perfect.
Right or not right?
Yeah, that's what you want. I just want to make sure because
so just like here's my pattern in my family system, not with you, Marc.
Yeah,
is I get blamed for things I didn't do.
Yeah, well, I wasn't looking to blame. I was just like I was looking for the pattern because I heard it a couple of times and I thought, geez, I wonder if maybe it's on her camera microphone or something like that.
See, you think it's me.
Well,
but the question would
only
be
because that's where I recognize the pattern.
Judy.
That was all.
Yeah.
The question would be,
thanks for checking.
Who in your family got blamed for something that they didn't do, and who are you representing?
Right.
And so who's been excluded that you need to member?
Right. And how many generations? That was part of my question. Do I go back or does one go back?
It depends. Usually I work fairly close to now, but it can go back up to 7 generations if the incident or event was significant enough. And that I have seen.
And let's stick with the how for a minute. How do you access unconscious? What is the most effective way to access this unconscious information? Because it's not always obvious. Yeah.
No, it really isn't. So you want me to get into the how to?
Let's do the how. Yeah, I
Good.
think so.
So in the how to, one of the ways that's super helpful is what we call a constellation. And a constellation means the dimensionalization of an issue, including every single element or person who belongs to that issue. So easily explained, let's suppose we're looking to see for a piece of information in your family system. I might say to you, Tasha, I want you to find somebody to represent your mother, your father, your siblings, yourself. Write each one down on a piece of paper for me, and you're going to place it down on the floor. Now, in a live event, I will use live representatives. Here's what we know. We are very quickly able to transfer thoughts and emotions onto inanimate objects or other objects. So what happens for us is we begin to see it, hear it, touch it, walk through it, maybe even taste it, smell it, and suddenly we're having this whole experience in 3D of the issue that we've been carrying in our heads. We've put it in front of us just far enough for us to be able to experience it, and we then have an embodied experience of a couple of things. The issue, how it's affecting us, what we can do with it. And so you will often see in the moment, you'll actually see a client give it a visceral jolt because something's hit and they recognize where it's come from. And the second jolt is often when they recognize either it doesn't belong to them, or where I've had people who say there is no love in my family. And I say, what about you? I'm full of love, but it doesn't belong here. Yes, it does. You're the one to change it. You're the one they gave the tiny bits to so that you could grow it. Do you understand that in this family, you bring love? And there'll be another visceral jolt because now it's starting to re-encode in the moment. They're having an embodied experience they will often say to me, my thoughts are changing. My feelings are changing. I can feel my body changing. I'm not the same person.
Right. It's as if we're in that moment in alignment with what wants to be birthed out of all of
Totally.
this. Yeah.
Totally. The head, the heart, and the gut are all saying yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah.
they achieve a state of cohesion. And when that happens, what we sell ourselves in that moment, we will buy.
It's the most delightful feeling. I don't know why, but I always see it as ... It's like the gap, the space, the unknown, making friends in there, and all of a sudden those 3 dots connect, and there it is, wisdom. It's a beautiful,
It's beautiful.
thing.
And it also very often echoes 2 ways. It, of course, creates you different in the moment and those who come after you, because now you're changing your emotional DNA. But when you look with those eyes at what came before you, often the villain is no longer the villain, the anger is no longer the anger, and it begins to switch up. And now we have a completely different history too.
What do you think the hardest thing about breaking these patterns and cycles is?
I think the fear that if I let that go, what do I have in its place? Which is exactly why I don't stop where many traditional constellators do. I want to know, what is it that's stopping for you? But also, what is the next step? And what is the first step? And what are the first words and the first thoughts? Because those are going to switch up the way you are to the way you are becoming.
Mm-hmm. Marc, can you unpin? I really love to get Judy back up top, and I can't because everybody's pinned. I've been texting you, but
we're not pinned or spotlighted, but because we're recording, it won't move.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sorry.
So when you moved yourself, it all moved. Okay. Do you have some questions, Marc? You want to jump in here?
Well, I think it's fascinating because I've heard the 7 generations past and 7 generations forward, but I guess my question is that it must really go back even longer than 7 generations if it's going to be encoded all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you have that information, you're going to find it, and you're going to find that something maybe even simple ignited the so-called truth that now lives in the family system. And everybody goes, oh, so that's what that was back there. It doesn't mean the same now.
Is it, I guess my question too is, how much of it is learned? Because you did speak about how, going up, hear different things of our family. But if we're hearing certain stories of our family history, because some families, they know, a lot of history, how much of that then becomes kind of like a subconscious implant versus a DNA?
I think you have elements of both, because what we've also seen is we've had clients where they're adopted, for example, and they know nothing about their history, but they carry all of this baggage, and we say, see if you can find your parent. And I've had them come in, and the one will say, there was a very big one, it actually wasn't mine, it was another person's client, but this person kept carving the word pig in their thigh. And when they went to go and find their parent, the parent said, I was raped by a pig of a man at the age of 14.
Wow.
So we carry it. It passes. Some of it is learned. Some of it is encoded and passes down.
And was that from the birth parent or the adoptive parent?
That was from the birth parent.
From the birth parent. So would that person inherit both?
For me, the way that I work, and as I understand it very much, you inherit this set for your biological piece, but also emotional DNA, but you absolutely also take on from the adoptive parents. And it's a question of you have more, not less.
And that would cover then the psychological and the energetic transmission.
On both sides, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it would.
And it makes me think like an element of confusion. If it's one thing, you have an adoptive family and the whole genetic thing, trying to figure stuff out, not knowing.
And that's exactly where constellations is beautiful, because I work with people in that situation, and we set up the representatives for both.
Lovely.
And then we show them their place between or with both. And that they wind up with a very clear understanding of, you are my mother, you are my father. You are my adopted mother, you are my adopted father. I have place for all of you. There is no need for exclusion of one or the other. I am generously provided for. I have double.
And I love the magic that occurs when the person representing the parent allows information to flow out of them. It's
absolutely
shocking. It's so informative. It's so almost, it's mystical to me. It's beautiful and mystical when
it's
that happens.
incredibly logical and totally mystical.
Yeah.
Both at the same time. The coincidences and synchronicities are so many that there's no way to just call them coincidences. I have somebody who has a father who was in Vietnam, who chooses a representative for her father, who manages and then collapses afterwards and says, my father was a draft dodger. Now I understand both sides. My heart is so different. So it's no coincidence. We choose very wisely who will represent.
How long would an average constellation take?
I don't know that there are average ones, but I would say between an hour and 2 hours, and it depends. If it's a personal one, probably an hour to an hour and a half. But if I stumble into a meta constellation, which is something where we have war or famine or one of the big forces, that can take a good 2 to 2.5 hours. And if I'm doing an organizational one, that can take a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the shadow of organizations, because this is one way you could access it and really see what's going on. I mean, you could have the most well-meaning people at the head of a company and things are going awry or people are acting out, and it's so inexplicable until you tap into the shadow. Maybe you could comment on that, why it's
or
so
until
important.
you tap into the DNA of the company, right? Which is what you're talking about, the emotional DNA of the company.
Yeah. I guess for me, shadow is anything in the dark. So I include,
Perfect.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that, then we have an unknown piece that we're going to go and look at. So let's take an example. We have CEOs never last longer than 6 months. Doesn't matter how good they are, boom, they're gone in 6 months. What's going on? Mm-hmm. If I look at that, I will go back and see who was the first CEO who disappeared after 6 months. What is the story? What happened? Because the minute he disappeared, if it was in a manner that didn't allow the system to settle, that DNA is still there. And in fact, that place and that role is still inhabited. Nobody else can get past that inhabitation. So they're going to get stuck at exactly the same 6 months. So what we do is we look to seek the wisdom from the one who disappeared. We look to acknowledge the one who disappeared. Then we represent all of the subsequent ones, and then the latest CEO, and the latest CEO will look at the first one who disappeared and say, I see you. I see what you did. I see what happened. Will you watch me as I do it differently? I can take this from you, and this I can leave with you. And will you watch me again as I do it differently? There is so much I can take to grow, and now I must add my own chapter. And that's the way that you clean that role so that the current one can come in, because otherwise, not only does he struggle, but all of the others who were left behind have an unconscious loyalty to the one who's gone.
Yeah.
So they can't even see the current CEO.
Yeah. I so noticed that an organization that I was involved in, there was always one bad guy. There had to be a bad guy, someone who was, everything was pinned on. They were the bad guy. They were the problem for a period of time. And then they would leave in some dramatic fashion and it would be a big drama. But then very soon after, there would be a new bad guy. But
that's
always,
right.
There had to be somebody.
Yeah, burden position. If you've got a burden position and you don't clean it up, it just rotates. It's like that revolving door syndrome.
Mm-hmm. How do you see all this fitting in with spiritual development?
You know, Science and spirituality really are not mutually exclusive. They
Nice
like
to
to
hear.
pretend they are, but they really are not. The spiritual piece is sometimes a teeny bit ahead of the science. It dares to go looking, and then science goes, I wonder what that is. Let's take a look. How do I see it in terms of epigenetics? Epigenetics is fabulous because it finally cottoned on and went, hey, there's something happening there, and started to explain what we were seeing. So I see them very much as supporting actors in a really big play. They're really good to each other. They've just got to remember that.
And so maybe we can broaden our lens now to include the global, because I don't believe there's ever been a time where not only are things so volatile, people are picking sides, but the other thing I noticed, and sometimes I let it in, and I have to say that sometimes it gets in, and then I emotionally have a bit of a field day with it before I can transition out and understand, as you said, indicated that something good is trying to be birthed here. But
right.
the recent piece for me, and I wonder if I'm going to want you to comment on this war in Ukraine, as soon as, there was a moment of it being a unifying possibility. And then I started to see social media again, not only picking sides. I mean, to me, it was astounding. But in other words, replicating the idea of a war in factions that are not even in a war and making it personal. So the narcissism to me blew me away. People are dying in the Ukraine, but you're going to make it about you here as you're sitting in your apartment sipping coffee. It's a problem because, and on and on. I saw so many different takes on it that I thought I was going to scream. So like I say, I have a moment where it gets in, and I think I'm done with all humanity. I just do not understand what everyone's up to. And then I recognize it's like what you were talking about here, that moment of opportunity never goes away. It's here right now,
it's
today.
Always there. It's not that you get that old idea of you only get one chance is an old idea.
So let's name the opportunity. I really want you to do that because I know you.
Okay, so if I look at this in particular, we have one person who has a whole population either believing or held hostage. We have the opportunity for history to repeat itself. At the same time, there is so much kindness happening and so much overt protest against what is happening that I don't think we've seen the like of that before. It is still a unifying moment, and it wants to grow. Right before I came on with you, there was a bakery in San Antonio in Texas with a Ukrainian immigrant. She's the baker there. And they showed thousands, literally thousands of people around the block. And they're all coming in because she said, what I bake will go to the Ukrainians. And people are going, let me in. Anything I can do to be a part of this and to make it okay, let me in. Now, what we've got to be careful of is, yes, we have a bad guy, but are we going to make him bad and make a whole country bad? Or are we going to say something here is not being looked at? Right. What wasn't looked at back then, and what are we not looking at now? At the same time, we have a country like Germany. And is Germany having its moment because it is taking in a lot of those who've been displaced? Is it saying, this is my turn to balance? I can do this. I'm changing my emotional DNA. Look at us. And in Europe, I had somebody from Denmark this morning who said, Germany has to stand strong. It has to stand for what is good. We're looking at it. Germany, and years ago, 80 years ago, that was not the case. They were looking at Germany very differently.
No, it's so important. It's so important. And the fact that, and people don't seem to remember this part of history, or perhaps they never learned it, that the Germans and the Russians were together at the beginning of the war for 2 years. They were both on the same side. And then the Nazis invaded Russia, and so they switched and became an ally. But that piece too is sort of like all these pieces are so relevant. I think the part that hits me is, what is your take on the why people seem driven to polarize so intensely? So yes, there are those who are making Putin the bad guy, but then there are those who are trying to support him. And I'm not talking about completely loony people. Intelligent people are explaining his actions and diminishing the impact. What is that about?
They're caught in a systemic trance, is what they are. They're actually whatever you remember you spoke about the values and all that sort of thing. It's going to pull them, and so it's pulling them into different places. One is the place that says this is wrong, and we have to stand up for what is right. The other one is going, no, but he's right, because people are trying to take away what belongs to me. So what we're missing here is, what are people so afraid of that they will lose or gain depending on the side? And what is it that we keep missing, even in the US? What is it that we're not looking at? Because if I say you're right and I'm wrong, what I'm doing is I'm not giving you space to belong. I'm not creating enough space or a big enough game that we can all play. And I think it's very much at the moment about, can we play a game that is big enough and desirable enough that everybody can play? I think that's where we are.
Yeah, inclusion. You're right. Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing, the only state that my body relaxes in, and it's like, yes, we have problems, but you know what? Together,
exactly,
is possible.
And in fact,
fragmented, it is just,
it
like
is
I
not
say,
possible.
An internal war and a war amongst friends. It's just horrific. It's so awful.
And if we at all begin to devolve into victims,
right,
it's a very dangerous place to be, because then we start creating perpetrators, which is a very dangerous state to be. And in fact, today I was busy writing, because I'm doing a course for Shift Network. And one of the things that I was saying was, until I, the victim, can open my heart and say victim no more, and open it to a space because I'm a descendant of a group of victims, until I can say I'm not doing that anymore, and open my heart to the descendants of the perpetrators, and together we find something that is different but bigger.
Yes,
we're in a little bit of trouble.
Yes. But it's beautiful that the very wound itself becomes, I don't know what I'm seeing, kind of a torch.
Oh no, the wound
for the light.
Absolutely, the wound is the platform or the igniter or the unleasher of that powerful piece of who you are. Now, does it have to be that way? No, because if we learn to tune into the wow of life and the incredibleness, for want of a better word, of life, we can actually transform without having to suffer. We transform through wow. And when you watch people do that, they too are never the same again, and they cannot go to the suffering into transformation.
Beautiful. I want to tell people about your father meditation. So, and you can tell us where to get it. I experienced it. This is a meditation created by Judy. It was fascinating to me. I mean, I love meditation. I love journey. So I was 100% in. At one point, you asked the listener to turn and face the generations and of men. So we're dealing with father energy, which I as I alluded to, I have no information. So much on my mother's side. We are a matriarch by default, but nothing, blank on the masculine. So I kind of went, oh, my dad. Well, okay. Like, again, I could feel I wasn't all that excited, going, why isn't it a mother one? I'm struggling with some pieces here. But nevertheless, I felt like I was going into the void. And so I turned and I faced my dad, and he's passed. That was okay. And beyond him, I knew the name of his father. That's it. But all of a sudden, information started to come. It was very difficult. Like, it did not want to have substance. And I let that be. I thought, I'm not going to struggle with this. It felt the way my family looked when I did a genogram, blank, kind of. However, the piece that I want to share with you that I love your comment on, when you invited us to speak in the meditation to the lineage, to the ancestors on the masculine side, my first thought was, well, they're all losers, which is exactly reflecting
Right.
the system. And then I just took a big, deep breath, and out of my mouth came, you could do better. And then right away, a wave came that said, I will do better. I
Beautiful.
will do better. Like it was right on the
Beautiful.
tail end. It was like, yes, I did have a shitty line of masculine, absentee, whatever. But you know what? I can do better. And as soon as I did that, I went, I feel like I know my lineage now without any information.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. What you did was, I would give you another line. For all of you who couldn't,
Yes, I will.
I will.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it.
And that's yours. That information is that you are never not connected to your lineage, ever. You are always connected. It will speak to you. When you open your heart, it will fill your heart. When you open your mind, it will do the same. And when you opened your mouth, it did that too.
Beautiful. So tell us what you're up to next. We only have a few more minutes. I want to make sure our listeners, your book, tell us about where they can get your book. And
so let me tell you all of those bits and pieces. Lots of exciting stuff happening. The book comes out June 6th, but you can order it now on all of the big booksellers. It is available for pre-order. The meditations, the meditation of the mother and the meditation of the father.
You do have mother. Yes.
I do have mother.
Me the mother. Please send me the mother.
If you send me an email, I will send you the mother.
Okay.
So the meditation of the mother and the meditation of the father, you can find at my website, which is Judy Wilkins-Smith.com. So we have that. And then Shift Network has invited me to do a 7-part course for them. So we're busy with that. A lot of podcasts, a lot of people talking about it, because there are over 100 million family trees. So people know that this is important. This work tells them why it's important. Mm-hmm. It's not just about where you belong, it's how you belong and what lives there. And this is, I refer
and
to
how to evolve it.
Exactly. This really is genealogy 2.0, and the book is incredibly practical. People say, describe it. I say it's practical magic. It teaches you exactly how to do it, so that if you can't get to an event, you can do this. August, we have a live event in Dallas, and that is Emotional DNA. That's 3 days of all of this work and setting the baseline and explaining what it is and learning to use it and having experiences of it. And then the flagship one is November the 10th through 13th at Walt Disney World, because that is the home of magic. And by nature, we have magical souls. And so I take people for 4 days. And this year it will be capability and resilience DNA. Because, boy, we don't realize how capable we've become, mm-hmm. and how adaptable we've become, and how resilient we've become. And if you don't encode that consciously, we miss an opportunity. So this is what we will be doing for 4 days in a world created by a man who really did not come from a tremendous amount, but saw what was possible and went there.
And how experiential will it be? Will you be doing? So you'll be doing constellations?
What I do is I talk. I do a lecture piece. We do a practical exercise. You do constellations. And everybody gets a chance to break out into groups, which we monitor and rotate through. And then on day 4, that day belongs to me. And what I do is I do the constellations with people from the audience. But people tell me every time I do them, when you do a constellation, it doesn't matter if it's mine. I get mm-hmm. so much mm-hmm. that I've had a constellation anyway. So that's what we do for day 4. And in the evenings, we go play.
What are the dates of the Shift Network event? That's all online, yes?
Gosh, it's coming online. It will start mid-July. I think it's around about the 15th. And it's for 90 minutes, I believe, every week for 7 consecutive weeks. And that is really getting into this and breaking it down into its little parts so that people get to understand every aspect of it and use it.
I think we should bring you to Vancouver, Marc. I think we need to bring Judy to Vancouver.
We can certainly do that. And yeah, the Shift Network, the promotional window is June 15th to July 5th, because we work with the Shift Network as to some of the speakers and promotion. So we'll follow up with you again closer to that time.
That would be
and
awesome.
We'll definitely have you on our pages and get the links there and in the produced website page and things like that. So we'll make sure that we have all that and circle back around again. And when we can all travel freely and we can start doing events, we'll take a look at having you.
That would be awesome. And all you've got to do is promise me that if I come there, I'll get proper Cadbury's.
Oh, yes. Proper Cadbury's. Okay.
And very good beaver tails and pastries.
Beaver tails and pastries. Okay, well, I'm a concierge by nature, so I am going to find the best. We don't have beaver tails in Vancouver.
You don't?
Oh,
Okay,
I'm sure they've got to be somewhere. I wouldn't know.
But I'm going to find the next best thing. I'm going to learn how to make them. I will make you a beaver tail. How's that?
Done. And maple syrup. Good. Oh, yeah. Fabulous maple syrup.
So you know what I would love if you're listening to the show and you're thinking, I really want to do this, because honestly, working in person and doing a constellation is like no other experience you have ever had in your entire life. Please let us know so we know that we've got enough people. How many people would be in a workshop for a constellation?
Anywhere from about 40 to 1,000. Pick it.
Oh, you can do huge numbers.
I can. I've actually tested it out, and believe it or not, the place I tested it in was Canada, outside of Toronto. They gave me an hour and a half to do some work in one of the big one of these big events they had, and 3 hours later we were still going. And I worked with 300 people at a time, and they were all going, how is it possible? But they all got their piece of work.
So are they in small groups also?
They are in small groups. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, so let us know if you're listening and you're interested. We need to know. We want to know our numbers so we can start talking. Marc and I can start talking venue and how to make this reality. But I really have enjoyed having you on the show, and thank you so much for sharing. Again, your book, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a powerful guide to transformation through disentangling multi-generational patterns. Again, so many words for something that's so essential. And as I said to you before the show started, as a psychotherapist, when I do a genogram with a person and they realize somebody else's pattern in their own body, and they just go, I don't have to process it, I'm letting it go, the weight is lifted. So now they have so much less to work on in therapy because it's literally gone, like literally. Like
yes, here's the piece that I always tell people as well, though. They say to me, oh, well, it's my mother's fault. Right. This is your responsibility. How's it mine? Because it's what you're going to do with it that counts next.
That's right. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Judy.
Thank you. I had such fun.